What up? What up? Good Friday, everybody. Trying to be prompt here. Yeah. Welcome, everybody. I'm Anjanika Brooks, and today I'm going to continue my series called From Unmothered to Empowered. And today we're asking the question, can being unmothered affect your romantic and, otherwise your relationships? And so I'm here to answer the question for you. It's my lunchtime, y'all, so I'm happy to be able to join y'all today. I hope that you can come in and, hang out with me for a little bit. If not, catch the replay. That's always cool too. And so I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to jump in here. Like I said, because I'm still on the clock on the 9 to 5, but this is the lunchtime for me. So anyway, a little bit about me before I jump into today's topic. I'm Anjanika Brooks, and I am the author of this little book called Unmothered, A Daughter's Guide to Acceptance, Healing, and Renewal. Yeah, so I wrote this book to help daughters who have difficult relationships or who have had difficult relationships with their mothers, be it that they feel like their mother is toxic, she shows narcissistic traits, she is emotionally unavailable, or perhaps not even present in the home. And so, you don't have a mother figure around, and that is causing some problems. But at any rate, I call the concept being unmothered, meaning you didn't get or you're not receiving what you should have from your mother, from the person that raised you. So I wrote the book because I went through this myself. Grew up in a home with my mother. She was a young mother, but she showed a lot of narcissistic traits. She was very much into herself, and partly being young and partly just not, I think, really being up to the challenge of raising children. She was unavailable, and our relationship wasn't very good. And I suffered some things later that I feel like are connected to that, and that's what I talk about in the book. But more than just talking about it, I give you the 9 steps to healing that I went through to get to the point that I am at today. And I do feel whole, I do feel complete, but healing is a journey, and everybody's journey is different. So I've provided 9 steps in the book that can help you if you are ready to heal. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into today's topic, because it's a pretty heavy one. I feel like all the topics kind of just dealing with being unmothered are heavy, and I guess that's just, it's just the territory, that's just how it is. But I want to start having these conversations because I think that it's going to be helpful for us going forward. I think it's going to be helpful for the generations to come. I think it's going to be helpful for our children. So I'm going to try to be as candid as I can right now. Hey Bianca, thanks for joining. I'm going to try to be as candid as I can about this very sensitive subject of being unmothered and how it affects romantic relationships. So, what are some things that I think happen to me? I'm gonna use me as an example, and this could be, could be happening to you. You may notice. So, I grew up, and my mom, like I said, she was young. She wasn't married. My father and her, dated or whatever, and they separated at some point when my sister and I were very young. And so she had boyfriends. And so sometimes, they didn't always treat her very well. And, she eventually ended up marrying my brother's father. But before that, there were various different relationships that she had. Some were long-term and some weren't. And so during those relationships, there were things that I observed, things that I noticed. And so granted, remember, we didn't have a really good relationship, my mother and I. So she wasn't always talking everything out with me either. Not in a sense of she has to answer to me for who she was dating, because I also had my grandmother in the home, and she took very good care of us and took up the slack for my mom. But so I wasn't saying like my mom needed to give permission. It's just some things would be happening to her, and as a child, it was very hard to process. Sometimes some of the guys she dated could be verbally abusive or physically abusive. I actually saw some of that happen. Now, granted, I never saw any of that happen with my father because he lived in another state. The people that were there that she was involved with didn't always seem like a good fit to me as a child. So I saw a lot of that. The other thing that affected me was us not having a relationship, not being close. So, like, you would bring a daughter in and maybe try to teach her before she starts dating. Some of that, it just didn't happen because she didn't have the forethought to think of how to prepare me. She didn't even really want to talk about some of the things they talked about in school, like whether it was sex education or birth control. She just felt very, uncomfortable about it for whatever reason, and she would be very kind of off-putting, like it wasn't important. And so we didn't talk about those things. And I think that I expected her to, being the younger one when compared to my grandmother. I didn't expect my grandma to talk about it because I knew she was old school and I understood that, but I did expect my mama to do a lot better, and she didn't. She just was not interested in the subject, and so I felt like it kind of left me unprepared. Some of the issues that my mother had, there was infidelity with some of these boyfriends that she dated, and really the long-term boyfriend she had that she thought they were going to be married. And I talk about this in detail in the book, but she thought they were going to be married, and it ended up that didn't happen because he had another relationship. And so, and watching that, I internalized a lot of it without knowing it. One of the other things I would say is just some of her traits, like how she would speak to me. So when we did interact, it wasn't positive all the time. As a daughter, I didn't seem to meet her standards for certain things. So, like, for instance, I ran track. And so if I wasn't always winning, or if I wasn't like doing the best job, because she also ran track when she was in high school, she would compare me to her, and I wasn't good enough. And she would literally say, I felt like you should have done better, or, well, you didn't win today, so, you're not going to get whatever this I promised you because you didn't win. And so it would be things like, she might promise me like $1 or some amount of money. And I knew I wasn't going to get it anyway. But she would kind of use that, well, you didn't win, as a reason to not, make good on the promise. And so it was things like that. I was in a pageant once and during high school, and the same thing. If I wasn't winning, then she couldn't properly support me. And so I just internalized a lot of that as well, the dynamics in our relationship. So let's recap real quick. So I watched some of the things that happened with her and the men she dated. I did not have a good relationship with her myself, and the way she spoke to me or the way she treated me made me feel less than, made me feel not good enough. So I had that in mind. And then I also didn't get, I would say, instruction from her. I didn't get guidance from her when I was ready to date. All right, so how did that show up later in my marriage and my relationships? And so I'll say that it really started early. So the first thing I tried to do, the first way it showed up, was with me as a teenager. I was trying to fill the void of my parents not being there for me. Because remember, my father was absent in the home. Although I knew who my father was, and he would come to town, ever so often, like once a year or maybe even less, I don't know. But I knew of him, was very close with my grandmother on his side. I didn't have him there. So it was very difficult. Oh, I see a question here. So Bianca says, when did you realize what you didn't receive was missing? I didn't realize that until I was married and a grown woman. Did I realize that there were some problems? So what I'm talking about now is when I first started dating, there was no way for me to know. I didn't understand that I was trying to fill a void. I didn't understand that I wanted my parents to be interested in me. Yes, I had my grandmother there. I had her love. I had her guidance. She was really good with certain things. Now, she didn't want to talk about relationships and things like that too much. She did say that, we shouldn't allow anyone to hit us or, things like that, even though my mother did allow that at some point. She would tell us we shouldn't allow that. However, she wasn't going to talk about any of the details. It was basically girls don't look at boys and boys don't look at girls. And that's as far as my grandmother was going to go with any of that. So that was not very helpful. So I'm out here, I'm about 13. So my birthday is early. I was on my way to high school. I actually entered high school and I was 13 years old. And that's common. It was, I was in ninth grade. So I'm heading to ninth grade and I'm out here with, young men that are a lot older than me, a lot smarter than me, a lot more experienced. So I'm trying to fill a void for the attention that I didn't get at home, for the attention that I didn't get from my mother and my father, not understanding that. And I'm just picking anybody. Why? Because, they were interested, or they said I was pretty, or they said I was smart, or whatever it was. And so there was a big danger in that, because they, not just being older, they just knew more. I was not savvy at all. I was, maybe it didn't even seem like I had common sense when it came to things that I should know, because I was just really trying to make myself feel better about me as a person. I wanted to feel accepted. And so that was one of the things I was trying to fill a void. The next thing was I made her issues my issues. And so that was when I was in my marriage, when I realized that was happening. The things that my mother went through, like I said, with the infidelity, with worrying that, her man was always stepping out on her, worried that, he was looking at this one or this one was trying to get him. Those things were in my head and I didn't even know it. And I don't think, it took me some years to realize, why am I always thinking this? Why am I always thinking about, what he's going to do? Now, let me pause right here and give a disclaimer. People are people, and you can't control anybody. So men do a whole lot of different things. So I am not saying that, my husband was perfect and, all boyfriends are going to be great. We know this isn't true. But it's really unfair for you to enter a relationship and you kind of have a preconceived notion in your head. Like if we say something like, all men are dogs, we know that that's not true. No matter how much it may have been proven or how much you've seen it, it is not true, because you don't know every single person and you don't know, how they're going to behave. And you don't even know all the time how you're going to behave. You can't be sure of that. So you can't make a blanket statement like that. Because when you come into a relationship where you need to be giving of yourself and you need to be somewhat open, you already have an idea in your head and it changes things. It changes how you see things. So even if nothing was going on, I may have not been able to tell that, because in my mind, I was worried because I had seen it play out before me. And, there were no clues from my mom. There was, everything seemed fine. For years she dated the one man and everything seemed like it was great and like they were going to get married. So I was constantly like hyper vigilant, with my husband in my relationship. And it took just going through some things. We did go through marriage counseling, and it wasn't just because of me, having these thoughts in my head. We were a young couple at the time. Now we've been married almost 22 years, but at the time we were a young couple. And so we were going through different things and trying to figure things out. And so, so we did go through marriage counseling, but even then I couldn't really figure out why I had these thoughts, why I had these issues. So just finally one day I asked myself why I was obsessed with it, and I had to take a step back. And that's when I realized that I had taken on a bunch of the things that didn't belong to me, a bunch of the things that may never even happen to me. And I hadn't learned any lessons from them. So there was the void. There were her issues. The other thing I did sometimes was choosing someone that was like her, someone that would say negative things to me, someone that was narcissistic, only interested in themselves. I was in a relationship, and I was very young with this one, and I was being verbally abused, being, told that I wasn't this, I wasn't that, I couldn't, be this, that, and other, yet this boy was with me, and I didn't understand, well, why am I even in this relationship? But at the same time, I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want to lose him because I was young. I was a teenager. I didn't know any better. And so I was attracting people that weren't good for me because it was a familiar thing. Like some of it was familiar with the way I was feeling growing up, how I was talked to at home, how, I was dark. I was black like my daddy, my skin was too dark. So things like that were all in my head, and it made me choose the wrong people and stay with them, even though my value should have been higher, right? I just didn't know what it was. So there was that, and just a general sense of, and I'm looking over here at my notes, just a general sense of feeling like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't worthy of being loved. So those were all the things that played out in the relationships that I had. And I did, like I said, ultimately get married, and still things were happening. It was just basically wreaking havoc, I felt like, in our relationship. So if this is happening to you, you could be like me, and you don't know where the stuff came from. So how do you figure it out? How do you figure out that perhaps the relationship you have with your mother, of all people, is causing havoc now in your romantic relationships? I say the relationship you're having with your mother because I think as women, a lot of the time, people say, I hear the term daddy issues. And so that is real too. That's a whole different subject. I also have issues with my father because he wasn't in the home. But my issues are more so like no one can control me. No one can tell me what to do because I was around all women and there was no man in the house. And the way I was taught was that, the man was like going to be the head of the household, but he wasn't there. So I chose to do what I wanted to when it came to my mother, my grandmother. But no man could tell me what to do. So my daddy issues are separate, right? Mama issues, I think, are different. And so that's why I wanted to address it, because sometimes I don't think we realize how embedded, how deep they run when it comes to us as daughters, because we tend to think of mothers as being there and that being enough. And that's not always enough. And they do affect us deeply. They affect us just as deeply as when our fathers aren't there, when our fathers are there and they don't do the right things, or when our fathers are there and they're great, or our mothers are enabling and it's not so great. So both parents are extremely important in a home, in a child's life. And no, they don't have to be, from my blended families out there, they don't have to be in the home when I say that term. But what I mean is they need to be in the child's life. So they're important. They're important to raising a well-rounded and a confident and a emotionally stable person. So it's important. And none of us are going to be perfect at it, but it's important to provide it if we can. So how do we turn it around? How do we kind of pay attention to what's going on and notice it? Well, it's not that easy. But I think the first thing is if you are noticing a theme, like something that constantly upsets you with your mate, something that gets under your skin, you need to just take time and pause there. Pause. And if you need to write it out, journal it out. Big fan of journals here. If you need to talk to somebody else and bounce it off of them, go to a trusted person that will listen and not say, girl, this is what you need to do. You just want to kind of get it out of your head so that you can look at it and analyze it. And once you do that, you'll be able to backtrack and say, okay, how did I get here? And just ask, you're going to just have to ask the hard questions. Was there anything that happened, in childhood? Was there something that I constantly saw? Was I constantly told, men aren't any good or women are this way, depending on who you are dating or who you love? It could be anything that you were told, that you saw play out, and subconsciously it got into your head. You'll need to address it. To address it, it may take help. You may have to put yourself into therapy to have like really good guidance, really good professional guidance. I do suggest therapy. It's been amazing for me. I think that's one of the ways. But I do think really bringing it to light and saying, all right, these ideas that I hold, these things that I'm worried about, these things that trigger me, that upset me when it comes to my mate, is this really my stuff? Is this really coming from me? So that is the first thing, is that you have to identify it and just be able to check in with where that feeling, that emotion, that pain in some instances, where it's coming from. At that point, you can communicate with your mate what you're feeling. And hopefully when you're communicating what you are feeling, you are then able to debunk that whole thing. It could be a myth. It could be not real. And you just haven't considered that it's not real. For example, with infidelity, maybe there are no red flags. Maybe there's absolutely nothing going on that you need to be worried about, but you are just, like I said, hypervigilant, like I was, just thinking all these things because they're just in your head. So there are some ways to be reassured. There are some things that you can talk about with your mate that can help you to maybe feel like you can continue with the relationship. So that's what I would say first, is to, check in, do a gut check, write it out, talk it out, and see if maybe you are worried for no reason, hopefully. And it's hard to tell, I know, because, people aren't always truthful in their relationships, but you're going to be vulnerable in a relationship. You're going to be open. So I wish that I could protect you. I wish that I could protect my babies too. And, somebody could protect us. But really, to move forward in life and to experience anything, we're going to have to be somewhat vulnerable to risk, to things that could happen. So you're going to have to open up somewhere. And if you feel like you can trust a person, if you have talked it out and they really don't give you a reason to mistrust them, to distrust them, then ride with it, roll with it, and just know that that's just a part of life. Being vulnerable is a part of life. The next thing I would say is maybe you will want to spend some time assessing where you are as a person. So if you can't easily deal with what you're thinking or how it got there, or you don't trust the person, you're not sure if they're lying to you, you don't know what's going on, you don't know if they're deliberately hurting you, because it's not all infidelity, right? You don't know if they're talking to you and speaking to you in a certain way and if you deserve it, then it might be time to be on your own. It is never a problem to be on your own. And I say that in the warmest, kindest way I can. I know sometimes that we attach ourselves and we become codependent on other people, but sometimes you really need to go inward. And you have to go inward because you need to do work on you. And when you go inward, you can begin to see what are the things that make you happy. How do you want to be spoken to? You know what I mean? Things are going to happen. You're not going to always get along with each other. There are going to be blow-ups and fights. That's normal. That's normal, okay, in life. But how you process that, how you deal with that, is going to be dependent on you, partly. If you're a person that you can't listen to the other person, that's a problem. So you might want to spend some time with yourself. Try to get in touch with yourself. Understand what you need. Like I said, what makes you feel good in a relationship. What you're comfortable with giving. What you want the other person to bring. So you kind of think about these things when you're on your own, so that you don't cause a lot of turmoil and drama in the middle of a relationship. And so if you have the time and the space to step away and say, okay, I need some downtime. I need to be by myself. I need to figure out some things. I need to just check in and see how I got here. If you have some time, I highly suggest you do that, because alone time can be good. It can be a few months. It can be a year. But I would encourage you to take the time that you need to get to know yourself. Okay? The other thing I would say is to change your mindset. And we talked about mindset a bit a couple lives ago that I did. But mindset is always important, and I think that is the key. And that's the final key I have for you, is your mindset. There could be a part of you that has gone into the relationship and you don't feel that you deserve to be happy. And so it can be causing you to basically self-sabotage. So you can be planning and plotting ways and not really be aware of it to ruin your own relationship because it shouldn't work out for you. Why should it? Why should you be happy when all you ever saw around you was the opposite? Why, should you, be able to have your dreams when nobody in your family ever reached theirs? So sometimes it causes self-sabotage when we don't have our mindset right, when we don't expect greatness for ourselves, when we don't expect ourselves to be loved because we weren't loved or we didn't feel loved for so long. It can really get inside and you won't even realize it until it plays out. And then you have to go back and try to fix it. And so I want us to start thinking about winning, thinking about the good things in life. Because I know a lot of us, if you've experienced any childhood trauma or if you've seen anything around you, a lot of us just, sometimes we're not sure. And then just being in society, it's so difficult to be here sometimes, to exist as whoever you are. I feel like everybody gets discriminated against somehow, some way, at some point. So sometimes for the rest of us, it's just difficult. Or sometimes people are just mean. The people out here don't care like that. The world doesn't care. And so we don't feel like we can succeed. We don't feel like we can have that joy. Sometimes, some of us. So I'm just challenging you right now to stop and check your mindset and see if you are having more of a pessimistic view on things. So if you're expecting the relationship to fail, it probably will. And it could be self-sabotage. It might not be the other person doing anything really. It could just be you because of what you experienced being unmothered or what you did not receive being unmothered, because you don't know your worth. You weren't taught, because you've been hurt so many times, because you don't know what a happy marriage looks like. You don't know what family looks like, whether you are supporting each other from afar, meaning you might be blended and you might be in different homes, or whether you're together. You don't even know what that looks like because it's just never worked for you. So if all those things are in your head, it makes it very difficult to have an enjoyable relationship. But the way that you can fix it is by acknowledging some of the things that might be ongoing, repetitive, some of the things that you've seen play out, getting therapy, talking with somebody that you trust about it, just to bounce ideas off and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, not necessarily to receive advice, because you have to be careful with who you let in your relationships. And that is another point. Sometimes we do share. Some of us that still have our moms around. I don't. My mom passed away. But some of us that still have them around and they're toxic or narcissistic, we might overshare with them. And they won't guide us in the right way. And they do harm to the relationship. So just be really careful about who you talk to when you talk. I suggest a therapist. And I suggest checking on the mindset and seeing if you can find some positive affirmations, some good books to read, some affirming things that will help you to come to know who you are, so that when you are ready to step into a relationship, or even if you're ready to repair a relationship, or if you're in the middle of a relationship, you know who you are, and you know that you have the ability to grow, to change, and to be better. And that means you're expecting the same thing from the other person, and you're not putting yourself down, and you're not letting them do that. And you guys are coming to the table as equals. That's what you want. And I think when you come to the table like that, you have a much higher chance at being successful, at even being happy, and at staying together. So that is what I have for you today. I know there's so much more we could cover on this topic. I know that we could go deeper. And like I said, there's a lot that I unpack in the book. So there's, there are all kinds of ways that we could delve into the subject. But I just wanted to hit you with it today and kind of get the wheels turning, get you started on thinking if possibly being unmothered is, affecting your romantic relationships, and how do you change it. So I'm hoping that you learned something today, that you can take some tips away. I'm hoping that you can teach me something. If you have some questions, please DM me. Please comment on this live. You can always comment on my page. And just let me know what you're thinking. I don't have all the answers. I only know what I went through, how I got to this point, and how I started to feel better. So that's what this little book is that I have written. It just talks about that, how I got here. So I'm sharing that with you in hopes that it'll help you. And yeah, so if you want to spend more time, or you want to chat, or you need somebody to listen, I do have scheduling in 20-minute increments. You can go to my website to schedule with me free, and we can chit chat, or you can DM me. And so I thank you for your time today. Always a pleasure to get on and talk to you guys. And so if you need me, get at me. Other than that, I hope you have an amazing Friday, and I hope you really enjoy your weekend. Bye, guys.